I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press. Today we're going to be talking about On Writing, a memoir of the craft by Stephen King. This is kind of going to be one of my Stephen King book review videos. It's also going to be kind of one of my writing advice videos. So pay attention, because I'm going to tell you, this is the one and only book that I've got the paperback here. I bought the hardcover when it came out in the year 2000. And it's literally the only book I've ever read about how to write. And I'm telling you, I've always, ever since I was a kid and I read The Sword of Shannara, if you've been following my videos, you can go back and look at my Sword of Shannara video review where I talk about as a kid, I dreamed of being a writer. Never really got around to it. Long story short, never really got around to writing till later in my life because I just thought it was something that was beyond my scope of abilities. A man's got to know his limitations. And as I was growing up in my teenager years in my 20s, I knew my limitations. I was not ready to be a writer. I was not ready to be a professional novelist. Until I read, in the year 2000, I read Stephen King's On Writing. And I'm going to tell you, he boiled down, it's called a memoir of the craft. And he boiled down the craft of writing into words that I understood. And he explained his writing process and how to write in a way that I was like, I think I can do it. I think I can do this. The way he's teaching me to do it in this book, I think I can do it. And you know what? I started writing. There's a few other things that inspired me to write, but I started writing. One of the inspirations was this book On Writing. It's the only book I've ever read about writing. But it was enough. It was all that I needed. It's a short book. Now, I'm going to tell you something. The first half of it is a memoir of Stephen King's life. So he goes through his life from a kid all the way up until he became a published author, things that happened in his life that inspired him, that kind of got him into maybe wanting to write. And then it goes into his writing career and his first publications, and then his drug use and his early life as a writer, as a famous writer, getting more famous, getting more heavily into drugs, getting off of the drugs. Just the first half is really just a memoir. If you want to read a memoir of Stephen King's life told by Stephen King, the first half of this book, that's what you get. And it's very, very, very entertaining. And he sprinkles a little bit of writing advice throughout there. Now, the second half of the book is strictly about the craft of writing itself. And I'm telling you, it's gold. Every word of Stephen King's advice is spot on gold. It's a 250-page book. So there's 75 pages of his memoir, 75 pages teaching you how to write. And if you want to be a writer and you can't read the 75 pages that Stephen King's got in here on writing, then you'll never be a writer. You just don't have it in you. You got to, and he talks about this theme a lot. In fact, the two main themes of this book about when it comes to the writing portion of this book, his two main bits of his advice are read a lot, write a lot. And when he says read a lot, he means read a lot. Like read everything. If you're into epic fantasy, read that. If you're into epic science fiction, read that. But also read everything else. Read westerns, read horror, read thrillers, read John Grisham novels, read the Da Vinci Code, read Tolstoy, read everything you can. Read the good stuff and the bad stuff. Read books that you hate, and you can learn a lot from the books that you don't like. The books that you think are poorly written, you will learn a lot about how you can be a writer by avoiding those things that you don't like in the books that you think are poorly written. Read everything. And so if you can't read this 250-page novel on writing by Stephen King, you're already out of the competition. If you can't read it, if you want to be a writer and you can't pick this book up and read it, you're already out of the competition. Because you have to be a reader to be a writer. And Stephen King makes that abundantly clear in this book, as do pretty much myself and every other professional writer in the world. If you aren't reading a lot, you're just never going to make it. It's just not going to happen. So that's the one biggest thing to do, is if you want to be a writer and you're not reading right now, don't write anything. Just spend a few years reading everything you can. And that will get you trained to spot good writing, to spot bad writing, to spot the type of writing that you like and enjoy, to spot the type of writing that you don't like. And that's why it's important. And then you're going to find authors that you think are awesome, and you're going to want to emulate those authors. And I've got a ton of writing advice videos, and you can go watch those. We won't get into that too much. We will just get into the things that Stephen King points out in this book on writing. And he goes through everything that he thinks is important, point by point, starting with the first draft. Just type out your first draft as quick as you can, get the story on the page, because you can go back and edit it later. Too many people get bogged down with making sure that their first paragraph of their first book is perfect, and then they need their first page to be perfect, their first sentence, and then they just sit in a loop and redo those first few pages over and over and over. They never get anywhere because they think, well, it's got to be perfect, it's got to be perfect. No, your first draft can be an absolute horror show of poor writing. And that's what Stephen King is getting at. Just get the story on a page. We can go back and fix things later. His second thing that he talks about is plot, and how to plot, and how important plot is. I'm not going to get into the details of these things that he talks about, because I want you to read it for yourself. And I do other videos elsewhere about all these same subjects too. So if you want to watch those, go ahead, but I want you to read this for yourself. So I'm going to mention the things that he talks about point by point. First draft, plot, description. He gives you a chapter on how to describe things, like a character, a room, a car. If it needs describing, he tells you the best way to do that. And I'll let him teach you that in the book. Dialogue, he gives you examples of great dialogue and bad dialogue. He gives you big examples. Not only when he goes through these point by point, he shows you in other people's writing and his own writing and his own books examples of what he's doing. And not only that, but he provides, how he edits these things. He'll show you his first draft, and he'll show you how he edits that stuff, all the plot and description and dialogue. He's got a section on dialogue, how to do that right. A section on how to create good characters. He's got a section on how to come up with ideas, where ideas come from. It's simple stuff, he's like, imagine a spaceship. Okay, a spaceship probably is kind of like a building. It's probably like a skyscraper. You probably got a lot of people working in there, like plumbers and janitors. Well, wouldn't it be cool if you wrote a story about a janitor on a spaceship? That's how ideas spring up. And that's one of the examples he uses in here. A lot of times when I get asked about where your ideas come from, I'm like, I get people that want to be writers, they come up to us professional writers, we get this all the time. People come up to us and they ask us a gazillion questions. And one of the questions is, where do you get your idea? I want to be a writer. Where do you get your ideas? I'm like, man, if you don't just have ideas popping through your head all the time, that's another struggle, another hurdle you're going to have to overcome. You're going to have to figure out how to harness your thoughts into story ideas. And Stephen King gives you a few tricks on how to help do that. Symbolism, he's got a section on symbolism and theme within your books. Very important. He's got a section on revision. Again, first draft and then revision. And he shows you how to revise your books. He shows you step by step. Here's some of my first draft writing, and here is how I revised it and polished it to make it better. And he gives the examples in here. He doesn't just talk about it. He actually shows you the red lines that he marks out and the reason he tells you the reasons why he eliminates words, sentences, paragraphs, why he switches things around. He shows you why he does that. It's very, very great. And you can learn so much. You can learn so much just by looking at what his first drafts in comparison to his second drafts and all of the notes that he has put with revision. He has a section on pacing, how to pace your novel so it's keeps the reader interested. You know, he gives a section on research, when to research your books and how to do it. Now, if you watch, and he kind of does it the same way as me, where he'll just write a scene, and if it's a police, something about the police that he doesn't know, he'll continue on with the scene, and he won't stop in his first draft. He won't stop and get bogged down in researching everything about police procedural before he goes on. He'll just make a note. I don't really know this detail about police procedural. Research it, add it later. I do that. And the thing is when you read through his section by section on how to write, and you go through each one of these sections that I mentioned, he explains it so easily. It's just like a novice, like someone who there's no reason in this planet, there are so many, I'd say half the world is more talented than me when it comes to storytelling and writing. But reading this book and applying these principles made me a professional. It put me in the elite level. And it can do the same for you. I mean, if this book and following the policies and procedures of writing that he puts in this book can turn me, someone who has no ability to write, into a professional published writer, the same can be for you. He can do the same for you. If I can do it, anybody can do it. I mean, and that's the honest truth. I know a lot of people hate that kind of platitude where if you put your mind to it, you can do anything with your life. When it comes to, I would have loved to have been Michael Jordan. Like I said, I know my limitations. I would have never, no matter how much I practice basketball, a short little white guy like me, I'm not going to be Michael Jordan. That's a fact. So sometimes the platitude, it doesn't make sense. But when it comes to writing, when it comes to art, when it comes to playing guitar, there's a lot of stuff that you can know absolutely nothing about it. But if you apply the teachings of the master and you put in enough time, you can do it. And I'm here to tell you that I'm living proof of that. So Stephen King's On Writing Memoir, it's the first nonfiction book I've reviewed for my channel. I'm going to be doing some more because I don't just read novels, I read a lot of history, biography, and nonfiction. And we're going to be getting into some nonfiction. So this is the first nonfiction I'm going to do. It's going to be part of my Stephen King series and also my writing advice series. But this is one of the most important books as a writer in my life. It really is. And it should be in every writer's library. So if you don't have it, get it. If you're not a writer and you just like to read Stephen King stuff, this is still awesome. This is an awesome memoir of his life. And you'll enjoy it just on that level. If you have no interest in writing, you'll still enjoy it. I give it a 10 out of 10. It's one of the best things, if not, it's one of the top 5 things Stephen King has ever written. On Writing. You should go get it. It's sold in paperback and hardcover and ebook and Audible. You can get it anywhere. There's no excuse. There's no excuse, people. No excuse. On Writing by Stephen King.